Fortunes can be made or lost in the junior markets. Today, there is much greater potential reward than risk. Time is not on your side. We have already entered into the Great Reset, and many sectors are undervalued and disregarded by the markets. The problem is that there are too many companies, there are too many investment opportunities, and it takes a lot of time, a lot of interest, education, and connection to the capital markets to ascertain which of these has any merit. That's where the market model mindset fits. It's our solution for you. You will learn the foundations and fundamentals of how to make money by focusing in on a sector that has a possibility of creating generational wealth. Truly impressive returns. We've already shown the possibility of these returns with some of our picks and some of the companies that we've worked with. Companies like Great Bear Resources, Tudor Gold, Extra Technologies, and Desert Mountain Energy. So don't be left behind. Life is moving fast, and the biggest transfer of wealth is happening, and it's happening right now. So take this opportunity. Hi, everyone. It's Andrew with The Market Mindset. We've got Austin here as well, and we're looking forward to Austin kind of walking us through arguably the most important aspect of the gaming and esports, the whole kind of sector we've been talking about, and that's revenue. Like, how do we make money? Not only how do we make money, but how do they make money? What's the different revenue streams? How does it work? Because it can get convoluted very quickly. So maybe, we can start off small and build our way up, but let's talk about some of these revenue streams and income streams. If someone was to look at this and say, how do I make money? How do we make money here?
Yeah, so I think the important kind of thing to lay out first is obviously going to be what's the biggest revenue stream in the gaming industry. And that comes down to the actual video game market. So buying and selling video games themselves. That encompasses about 90 billion of the $250 billion industry that it is. So it's a sizable chunk. It's obviously the biggest chunk. And that's the most obvious one to talk about as well. You buy a game for your computer, you buy it for your PlayStation, Xbox, whatever console you play on, and you purchase the game, away you go, you're playing it. So that's the highest net gain one that there is. And that's the most obvious one in the sector. But the ones that kind of excite me more, some of the smaller ones that we can dive a little bit deeper into, and the ones that have a higher potential for growth. Because, yeah, the video game market can still grow, right? It can still get bigger, but it's not going to get the size of growth that some of these other revenue streams could have.
Sure, and you're talking about like EA Sports, so every sport game. You're talking about your Fortnites or your massive sandbox, like World of Warcraft games on your computer, or your shoot 'em games, or whatever. All of these software games that can be like epic mega games or massively like graphic detail orientated because it's just incredibly visual. That's what you're talking about, the game itself.
Yeah, the game itself, buying and purchasing the games. And I'm glad you kind of laid out a couple different options there of different types of games and how they can actually generate revenue differently. So I'll talk about that really quickly here. So there's obviously, you mentioned EA Sports. So we'll use that as an example. Let's use, FIFA as the example from EA Sports. You pay $80 for the new FIFA game and you play it as much as you want. You can play it as much or as little as you want. You've got the game, you own the game. Away you go, kind of, the traditional sense of what we think of buying a game. Then you mentioned World of Warcraft, which is one of these more subscription-based style ones. Now, there's still transactions within the game where you can get, cool-looking stuff, different items and things like that. But the main premise, the main revenue generator for World of Warcraft is the subscription base. So you're paying per month to play the game, or sometimes you can buy them in monthly packages or something like that. But that's how they're going to generate revenue. The third one, and the kind of most interesting one, the one that's blown up the most over the last few years, is you use Fortnite there. So Fortnite runs off kind of the micro transactions within the game, buying stuff. So like I said, World of Warcraft does something sort of similar, but Fortnite, Call of Duty, those kind of games have really maximized the in-game transactions, getting you to constantly be paying for, a new pass for the season to get upgraded gear. You want to buy a cool outfit for your character. Okay, well, that's going to cost you $5 or something like that. So they're all generating revenue in these different ways, but it's all within that same idea of you are paying for the video game itself. That's the largest part of the market.
Yeah, and it's like, so the one-off would be, you're buying NHL 2022, whereas the subscriptions, like I can tell you at one point, my understanding was like World of Warcraft had like 9 or 10 million users monthly paying $19 US A month.
Yeah.
So if someone is kind of new into this and looks at that and go, holy cow, like that's serious money coming in.
Yeah, and it's a model that makes sense to a lot of people because they understand like the Netflix model, that the subscription based. It's the exact same kind of idea. It's been around for literal decades. I mean, World of Warcraft came out in something like 2003, 2004.
Yeah.
So it's been around for decades, and they've really kind of honed in on how to make it successful.
And I like how you mentioned Netflix, because really, when you're talking about these games now, you're talking about like all entertainment as well. So your competition isn't necessarily just against another game or another type of style of game. It's against Netflix, because people say, with my free time, I can watch Netflix or I can play a game. And a lot of people are opting to play the video game.
Yeah, and it's something that gets described in the industry as the attention economy. So it's an economy that's based off captivating your attention and how much literal man hours you're willing to put into absorbing this product. So whether that's sitting and binging a Netflix show, whether it's, sitting there with a controller and crushing a couple games of FIFA, or a couple hours of FIFA, it all depends, but it's maximizing its revenue off of your attention to whatever product it is.
And I'll give a little bit of an example, because I know people who have played like this other model where you're buying skins, or you're buying a look, or you're buying things like, was it like a clan battle? Clash of Clans. So I know people who've spent a lot of money buying an extra bomb or an extra something or other, and they'll spend an extra money. And I would be surprised, because I played it and had some fun with it. That, or like the Farmville type things. They make a ton of money off of people just willing to boost $1 or $2 here and there, and maybe they get like $10, $15 a day that they're boosting just playing, just because it's small microtransactions.
Yeah, exactly. And that they're constantly able to keep generating revenue off that, because there'll always be something new that rolls out that people want, right? Whether it's a new gun in a Call of Duty game, whether it's a new cool looking hat for your character in Fortnite, or whatever it'll be, there'll always be that next thing. And even, it's important to say, like, companies like EA Sports are starting to get into that as well. They're starting to build that kind of thing into the FIFAs and the NHLs and the Madden type games as well, which, it leads to an interesting conversation from the actual like gamer perspective of, is this making the game better, or is this just the company finding new ways to maximize revenue? But obviously we're talking about revenue, so it's exciting for that perspective to see all these different games that are introducing this kind of model as well, because it's been very, very successful for, a game like Fortnite.
And this would be the type of thing that, you're wearing a helmet type of thing, but when you put this helmet on, you're entirely in another world.
Yes, exactly.
Or you're playing the sport. You're seeing it viewed like you're seeing someone rush at you, or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, and in some cases, you still may be actually using a controller to play that, or in other instances, it may actually be like hand movements and stuff like that are playing the game for you.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that's one that I really see a lot of growth with, and it's something that'll kind of combat what the gaming industry saw in 2020, and I'd expect they saw in 2021 as well, is that the console gaming market actually grew at its slowest rate since the mid 2010s. And that's because of a variety of different things. But I would say one would be the interest that VR has created. Another would be the massive growth of mobile gaming. Yes. Mobile games are expected to be worth about 57% of the digital gaming market by the end of 2021. So we're talking about like 57% of the entire video game market not being console-based games, but actually just being games you can play on your phone.
I'm going to really age myself here, but you're talking like Candy Crush, your Clash of Clans, this type of stuff.
Everything, anything, any
types.
game, you go to the App Store, go to games, anything on there that you download and you can waste hours playing. You can play it on an airplane while you're on a flight, and, sitting in an airport, sitting at the train station, sitting at a coffee shop, waiting for a meeting, anything like that.
Yeah. And this would kind of bring in your royal wins, where, not to make it a little bit more complicated, but it's now you're playing a mobile game, but a different style of, or different angle approach of betting.
Exactly. Now, Royal Winds wouldn't necessarily want us to call what they do gambling, because it's skill-based gaming.
Yes,
but it still falls under the gambling section of the gaming industry.
Yes.
Yeah. So what they have is a unique kind of model, and it's, like I said, it's a little bit different, but there is actual skill-based gaming in what they do. So they're looking at something, where you can, on your own natural ability, increase or decrease your ability to profit off that. rather than, with where we would think traditional sports gambling or, blackjack, poker, roulette, any of that stuff is okay. Well, I can have a method in place that I think might work, but it doesn't at the end of the day come down to your actual skill.
Yes. And not to jump kind of back and forth here, but with the console thing, and we also maybe get to tie in some meme stocks here, like you're not AMC, your GameStop, there a big talk with that was it moving to cloud-based, so away from selling physical consoles and physical games to more of an online cloud streaming type of thing. So that's another kind of thing that's changed or is changing as well, or?
It is. And, even a prime example of that would be the latest PlayStation, the PlayStation 5 and the new Xbox. Both have non-disc versions of the console that you can buy. So every game that you're getting, you're simply downloading through the cloud. And an even cooler aspect of that is, I own a PlayStation 5. I used to own a PlayStation 4. As soon as I, loaded up and got set up on the PlayStation 5, it gave me an option to download any games that I owned on the PlayStation 4 on the cloud version of PlayStation 4. I could bring them right over to the PlayStation 5 and start playing them right away.
So, I mean, a big part of looking at revenue too is, your growth of your audience, your target market, you name it. And that's interesting because I grew up like as a video game generation, and I'm not young, and I can still be enticed to play video games. So it's a pretty broad market now that I would imagine is growing at a pretty rapid rate.
It's growing at an exponential rate. And the clearest way to kind of track that is through the esports audience. So we've talked about this in earlier versions of this series, the esports market. And that's something that we really want to focus on with this going forward. But the key highlight out of that is that the global esports audience by the end of 2021 reached about 500 million people, which is insane. A majority of that being in the Asian market and North America, but it has started to make massive strides into Europe as well.
That's a big chunk of people to reach. And once again, we're talking specifically about esports. So we moved away from necessarily platforms or software to the actual events.
Yeah, so we're talking about the actual competitive play of video games, and it's burst onto the scene really in an electric kind of way. Worldwide revenue at the end of 2020 was 1.2 billion. They project that the industry could pass 2.5 billion by the end of 2022. That's massive growth. Like we're talking about the doubling in the space of 2 years. Now, has that been helped by the COVID situation and people being at home more? Absolutely. It's also been helped by the rise of Twitch, as we've talked about earlier. Platforms like Twitch and their ability for you to sit down in front of your computer and watch someone else play video games while you're doing anything. You can throw it on while you're working, throw it on while you're, doing some research or some homework for school stuff. When you think about, what you may have normally done when you were doing some research stuff back then, maybe throw on some music, throw on a podcast or something like that. Kids these days are pulling open another browser tab and throwing on Twitch and watching their favorite Twitch guy play for a couple hours while they're doing something else.
Yeah. So those platforms like a Twitch, or I know there's other companies, are platforms that not only will host, say, an event, possibly they're hosting players, or so you have to have the platform as well. So that's a revenue stream itself.
Yeah, so the platform themselves are revenue streams, the marketing, the advertising, all the promotional stuff, the actual ticket sales for these events. The revenue for esports breaks down in a lot of different ways, and there's lots of different interesting places that it can actually grow. And another one of those that really, like the one I really want to highlight would be the advertising and the teams. So you can think of that exactly the same way as you think of the Dallas Cowboys, right? They have a massive valuation. I think it's close to $5 billion, just the Dallas Cowboys alone. And that's their brand, right?
Yes.
So you're going to have esports teams that's going to be their brand as well, that they're going to have built up to this massive scale of being able to say, okay, well, hey, we can charge Toyota for coming on and being the sponsor of our team, and we're going to generate revenue through this Toyota sponsorship. Then Toyota saying, okay, well, hey, this is a chance for us to reach into a new market and tap in that way. So the advertising promotional side of things in esports has unbelievable potential.
Yeah, because you have like a truly captivated audience.
You do. You have a group of people that are locked in nonstop. And it's important to highlight that as each, every clump of 5 years of, kids getting older. So 15-year-olds that are going to be 20 years old in 5 years from now, they're all immersed in these video games. There's more boys and girls in the United States, under the ages of 15 that are playing video games than are playing football, basketball, soccer, and hockey combined.
Yes. That's disturbing, but also
it's a captive
important
audience.
Yes.
Yeah, disturbing for sure, but also important to highlight. And you can see the growth potential that this industry has, which is, it's a cool thing about gaming in general, is that as it's grown over the years, and it's obviously been a massive part of the economy in general for decades, but the way it's going to transition over these next 10 years, and things like esports and immersive games, and how they're going to step up and take over from maybe the more traditional side of what we were talking about earlier, where you're actually going to, buy a game and just download and play that game. The way that those new revenue streams within gaming are going to take off is where I see the most potential opportunity for investors and people who are actually interested in making money in this industry.
Okay, so take me there. Walk me through it.
Yeah, so obviously then the next step is to talk about the future and where this is all going to go. So easy examples of where this can actually take itself. My favorite one is the increased immersion in online gambling. So millions and millions of people love and enjoy gambling, and I'll be the first to say, make sure you're doing it responsibly. I can only, gamble as much as you can afford to responsibly. That's the key when it comes to gambling, but it's obviously extremely popular. The gambling market in the United States in 2021 was about $80 billion. That's only going to grow as it becomes more accessible in other states. But the way that ties really hand in hand with the other part of the gaming industry is where you're going to see more immersive gambling opportunities. So 3D games, VR casinos, live dealers over, they could be over something as simple as Twitch or platforms like that. Use VR headsets to feel like you're in a real life casino. Walking around, you can go from, okay, I'm going to go to the blackjack table, play for a bit. Oh, okay, maybe I'll go over here. I'll play roulette for a little bit. And so as that immersion market grows, they expect to see a kind of hand-in-hand growth with gambling in that, and creating the Vegas experience, let's say, right from the comfort of your own living room.
Yes. And people would pay a premium for that. I mean, that I could see that for sure.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, right? And that's just one of the exciting things about where gambling can go. I touched on this earlier, but as more states in the US, and we live in Canada, and obviously Canada's loosened its restrictions on gambling as well, which for anyone in Europe, this is kind of sounding like, what are you talking about? You're only now starting to catch up to the gambling train. But if you look at the size of the gambling market in Europe, and we can compare the data of Europe to Canada, and how many people already in Canada were engaging in gambling without it being technically legal, well, it's incredible to see the potential growth of the market in that industry. So that's another place that people are going to want to pay attention to. And what I would highlight, and one thing that I'm really interested in paying attention to, is seeing which of these gambling companies might tie themselves to game creators to target these VR type experiences. Now, another thing that we're going to have to pay attention to here is, are these going to be able to use real money? Because that's going to incentivize far more people than just like, well, I'm going to go play blackjack for fake money that I'm going to keep on my, on my PlayStation, that then I'll just go and use to gamble at a later date. There's got to be some actual real incentive for the real gambling market to want to take off. So I'd be interested to see, and I'd be paying close attention to, what companies try to tie themselves together and take off in that direction.
Well, you see this integration of blockchain and tokens and any coins that you could apply in here as well. Very curious.
It definitely has a massive amount of potential. Another area that has a massive amount of potential is the cloud gaming services. So a company like EA, they've already test run a cloud gambling service to show that they can kind of build the blueprints of it. Now, they're, I think, waiting more so for the actual hardware technology to catch up to where they want to go with it before they can really roll it out. But there's apps, and I mean, you talked about Royal Winds earlier, but there's countless apps that are available that you can go and start gambling on your phone, on mobile devices, right? And that cloud-based setup where it's not, it's all in the internet, right? And you tie it in NFTs and tokens and stuff as well, creates a massive opportunity and a massive growth side of things that, again, it's all going to start tying together. And that's what I hope people are really going to start to see out of this, is there's so many different ways for the industry to kind of help each other out, because it's all within the same umbrella of gaming. But there's been a lot of times throughout history where one side of the gaming industry hasn't really been working with the other side. And if
Yes.
these kind of companies start to come together, another huge one to think about is with esports, and esports gambling could create a massive market there as well. Like sports betting is so popular, and you could have a hugely popular esports betting market as well, that if they kind of work together and piggyback off each other, could continue to grow in massive, massive ways.
Excellent. Now it's a funny side note, but I remember there was lots of like gamification in regards to like the actual like offshore Asian market gambling and coins that we can leave for another day, but very interesting shenanigans going on with that. But it is important to see this integration of all of these things together. That's what's happening, and it's coming fast.
It is. And it's important to know, like, this industry is already bigger than the film industry, the music industry, the television industry, all of it. It's already there, and it's continuing to rapidly grow. I'll just note a couple numbers here as we wrap this up. There's an 11% growth between 2016 and 2017, and then another 10.9% growth between 2017 and 2018, just in the video game industry within gaming itself. Casual and hyper casual games are starting to really take over that mobile gaming sector, and that's only going to continue to grow as well, as you have more people with more cell phones in their hands and more interest in tapping into this. So the way that these companies are going to target, and I think the next time we talk here, we're going to start diving into some companies and different opportunities for investors. But it was important to really lay out this blueprint of getting your head wrapped around the industry as a whole and the potential that it has.
Alexa, this was a very important one. Thanks so much for walking us through that, because at the end of the day, we need to know how these companies make some money in order to even value them. So thank you, Austin. That was really great. We really appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. Looking forward to the next one.